Okay, so that it's recording.
Woohoo! And then there's nothing else you need to do. Just don't leave the meeting.
Okay.
Or hit stop recording or anything like that. It'll just go straight to Zoom, and it'll be there for us.
Great.
For me. So there's nothing else you need to do with that. Thank you. Okay, that took 5 minutes. Well done, everyone. I want to let you know 2 things, guys. One is that I am like I've overextended myself. I didn't rest after the weekend, and I'm too tired. But I've got a little rush of adrenaline, but I want to let you know that that's happening. Number 2, my computer continues to be crappy. And so my internet bandwidth continues to be really bad. I'm closing all my windows right now as we speak, just so that I have as much room on the computer as possible. So hopefully that will all work. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear and see me adequately.
Yes. And if you want a little bit of energy, Jude, let me know. Happy to. It's quick and easy.
You betcha, Guy. You go for it, my man.
Okay. All right.
And on my end, I just want to say part of the result of that is that you guys freeze, but I believe it's just on my end. So, Arena and Jeff, would you just say it's okay? Because you're frozen for me.
Yeah, it's
It's
okay.
okay.
Yeah, and Jeff? Good? And Arena, you're fine. I mean, Jean-V, you're fine?
Working on it. Yeah, here I am.
Excellent.
We're all here. The gang's all here.
And we know what's wrong with the computer, and I just need to get to a Mac guy and get it fixed. It's not anything complicated, but it's a limitation until it gets fixed. Okay, hello. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
We heard from Peter. He's not going to be here. Otherwise, we're all here already. Yay. So we don't do a massive check-in for the Zoom evenings because we're mostly about trying to be efficient. But just want to briefly say hello to people, and if there's anyone who needs to say, just want to let you know I'm sick, I might leave early, I had a really bad day, just stuff like that. Anybody have something that's important to kind of let us know about?
I'm finishing dinner.
That's fine. Eat away.
I'm driving.
No problem.
I'm driving. Sorry.
Yeah.
Guy is driving. Guy is going to focus on the road.
I got a text from my boyfriend that his mother is in the hospital. So it's possible that I'm going to have to drive up and get her. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Okay. Where does drive up mean?
Woodland? Apparently she was at a casino and she collapsed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
I hope she won first.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope she. I don't know what's going on at this point.
Wow, that's terrible.
And then just a friendly reminder to mute yourselves just enough that we don't have a lot of feedback going on. And Jeff, your picture went away, but I assume that means it's somehow okay. Okay. I'm sorry?
Didn't need to watch me blow my nose.
Oh,
Juju
cool.
is done.
Thank you. I'm feeling better already.
Oh.
It's nice to know you can drive and do that at the same time, Guy.
Am I unmuted? Because everyone just went away. I don't see any visuals anymore.
I don't know why.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
We're all here and we can see you.
Okay, I'll just sit here. I'm closing all my other tabs as well.
I'm missing Jean-V.
I'm trying to get back in. I don't know what happened.
I hear you. I don't see you though.
You said that you can see me?
Well, I was there a minute ago.
Yes.
Not there now.
So I'm gonna. I just want to let everyone know we all hear you. Okay. So I'm gonna invite you to troubleshoot in the background. Okay. As you try and figure out your ways with that. So I'm going to dive into the teaching for the evening. Oh, by the way, just a reminder, everyone, what am I going to say? Housekeeping? Make your coaching appointments. Just want to keep encouraging people to go ahead and do that. Okie dokies. So what I'm going to do here is a funny little, oh, I bet it's not going to let me share the screen. Oh, it does. Does it let me do the screen? Oh, it does. Yay. Can someone who has audio just say that if you can see this? Because everybody's frozen for me right now.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, we can
Great.
see it.
All right.
So I failed to get to the making a screen share on Google, the slides on Google for you, which that means, Guy, I'm going to share my notes with you. We're going to be looking at social issues and social trauma in constellations. And then at some point, Guy, if you're going to be driving the whole time, at some point you may just go off or just watch, because we're going to be doing a constellation together towards the end. But before we launch into this, I just want to invite everybody, take a second. And Guy, keep your eyes on the road, but everybody else, just take a second. Come to yourself, take a breath. We had a wonderful and intense weekend. We're back here 2 days later. Wouldn't surprise me if people were a little tired, a little constellationed out. But notice the bonds that this group shares now, having gotten through last weekend together. Notice what might feel different about that. And include Peter, of course. And then with enormous humility and a sense of our smallness, just feel some of the larger things that are around you right now. You know, I mean, Guy is in the middle of driving on our highways. That's a huge kind of social construct. I'm in a neighborhood. Most of us are in a neighborhood. Feel that neighborhood. The fog is coming over the hillside here. That's another system. Just notice the larger fields and forces around us. And that this is our home. This place in the world. Okay, come on back. So, I want to start out with the larger topic of social trauma. This is something that you may have heard Angwin St. Just write about. Wonder if I can do chat while I'm doing this now. I'll do chat later and I'll put her name in. Many of you have probably heard of Angwin St. Just. She's down in Arizona, and she's become fairly well known as one of the early people who worked with Bert Hellinger, and also was really an early colleague of Stephen Levine's as he was developing somatic experiencing as an approach to personal trauma. And she reminds us of the importance of the context of the social field when it comes to trauma. She makes a point that I think is quite true, which is there is essentially no individual trauma. It's a bit of a fiction. Yeah. The idea that, I, was walking down a street and a tree fell on me and it was traumatizing. It's just me. They're the people who maybe saw that, or the people who treated me, or the people in my family who could no longer be supported and helped by me and instead had to take care of me. There are all kinds of connections. And particularly when it comes to things like wars, oppressive forces, natural disasters, everything is accentuated by these social field energies because we have a limbic brain, we're social beings, we're reading everything around us all the time anyway. I remember I was here for the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. And I remember about 4 days afterwards, sort of sitting in my bedroom, and it was like I could feel the pain and the trauma of the whole city. And I myself didn't have any particularly negative consequences other than the fright of going through the earthquake itself, which is considerable. But all of a sudden I felt the whole city as an organism going through something together. And that makes the experience different, right? So this is something Angwin and many, many others remind us of. So things like wars, racism, sexism, colonialism, I could go on and on and on. These archetypes and cross-generational principles, they take on a life of their own and need including. You've seen in constellations representatives for war and peace, life and death, colonialism, patriarchy, et cetera, et cetera. These often have a really useful role. Just give an example. I had a client who was from Iran. She was born in Iran, really complicated family. And we work together very regularly. So I've looked at a lot of different angles on her family. And I know Iran to be, at least as patriarchal as the next culture, if not a bit more so, right? And she mentioned she herself is lesbian, and that is she is not out with her family. No way, Jose. And she mentioned that her brothers have been very unkind to her in that sort of patriarchal kind of way, that kind of bullying kind of way. And then she said, almost offhandedly, that, and she even thought that one of the brothers was closeted gay. I mean, closeted even to himself. And I went, oh. And I felt kind of a field. And at that point, what we did was a constellation, kind of remembering the Persian warrior male archetype. And it made a really big difference. Noticing kind of the emasculation of that archetype and how distorted it had gotten in the family. And that's what we worked with. These kinds of things, you'll feel them with a client. You'll have a sense of some larger force going on with them. I want to give another example of this that we have not worked with explicitly together yet. And I would love at some point to demonstrate an example of this because it's so powerful and useful. Jan Jakob Stam, I saw this years ago, and then I saw it again in Australia. He was working with a client who, I may have even mentioned it all to you, but it's worth remembering. A client who had been molested as a child. And basically that's what she asked to look at. And at some point he put her in the Constellation circle with 4 or 5 other people, and he named them as women who have been raped. The social field of women who have been raped. And needless to say, the client immediately felt a belonging with them. Quite beautiful, right? Quite a beautiful sense of belonging to these women, right? And he has a great sentence. It went into my quiver this last month. Another one of those healing sentences which was something like, I know so well what it is like. I know so well what you have experienced. It's quite a beautiful sentence. But if she wants to move forward in her life, she may need to take a step away from this group. And she may feel disloyal in doing that. Right? It's a very, very, very powerful format. I've used it a bunch of times, both just to help people notice their connection to these social fields, rape victims, long-time unemployed men, what would be some other ones? Parents who have lost children, kids who grew up without a father, things like this. And when you begin to feel like your loyalty is not just your own unique story, but you're connected in a sense of belonging with all these other people, and that number one, that's been strengthening and it means something, and number two, there may need to be some moving on from it that may feel disloyal. Yeah, it becomes a really powerful format. So I recommend you to think about this sometime when you're working with clients and something seems kind of stuck and you notice, this particular problem this client has, a lot of people have, right? And I bring that in every once in a while. I also just want to name as another kind of archetype, larger social fields, perpetrators and victims. This is classic in constellations, right? Perpetrators and victims, that dyad is very common in constellations. So someone really feels like a victim, say that, they're the victims of slavery or of the Holocaust, and we bring in the Nazis or the slave owners, right? So that's usually really needed when there's a lot of enduring victimhood or blame that doesn't seem amenable to change in some way. And then there are classic sentences that go along with that. The perpetrator hopefully gets to a place of responsibility and can say, I take responsibility. What I did cannot be undone. The victim says, what you did to us cannot be undone. Really simple, right? Not blamey. And then mutual scene. Yeah. It's very, very powerful stuff. Most of you have seen it at some time or another. However, I do want to invite you to consider that even when you have strong victimhood, sometimes this movement is not necessary. It's not actually what's called for. I remember having a constellation about 6 months ago, a year ago, where the parents were the ones who had gone as children through the Holocaust. And usually it's a little further back, like it's grandparents, but this was really immediate. The client's parents were children in the Holocaust. And so it was very, very immediate. And what became very clear was that these parents had never faced it, never talked about it, never grieved it. And so most of it was just this really, really, really slow process of these two people sort of grieving the dead and acknowledging what had happened. We never went into the victim-perpetrator dynamic. It just wasn't what was the main thing. So be open to the possibility that there are other ways to deal with victimhood, that there are other, there's grieving, there's dealing with shame. Sometimes in victimhood, there's shame, there's guilt, there's self-blame, yeah? So a lot of different things that might be the main thing that you want to look at and include, okay? And sometimes you just need to be brave and you need to set up the victims and perpetrators. You just have to. That's what needs to happen. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do is shift to an article by Francesca Mason-Boring, but before we do that, I just want to ask if there are any questions. I want to just pause for a moment, see if there are any questions or comments. People are following along. Am I going too fast? Just let me know.
Well, I had, I don't know, it might be like two of a, like when you were saying, two of a specific, like issue with perpetrators and victims, like when the victim is not able to move on. I mean, it seems like it's very per case kind of stance.
Yes.
You can't generalize, so it's hard to.
You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to like imagine how that go, but it's hard to do it without knowing the details. And it's like there's so many. Like, how would you work with someone who's has self-blame, but there's like so many details that kind of needed for that to know how to set up a constellation.
Yeah. So I'll give you a negative example.
Mm-hmm.
I may have told you the story about the woman, again, whose parents went through the Holocaust, different client. And I think I mentioned to you that her parents had really literally given her the task of preventing all future genocides. And she came to me because she was dealing with some chronic illness stuff. And what came through really strongly was that the ancestors really wanted to demote her from this, but she wouldn't. She just wouldn't. And probably, in hindsight, what would have been useful, this was a workshop with very short things, so I didn't have time to really do something longer with her. But in hindsight, what I would have done is brought in the Nazis and had an interaction between the Nazis and the Jews. Because she was having a little bit of perpetrator energy. She was a little entangled, which is really common. We know this, right? When you're a victim and you want to survive, who do you look to for an example of strength? You look to the perpetrators, right? Because they're strong. This is the cause of Stockholm syndrome, right? You know, I may be kidnapped by these horrible people, but you start to identify with them because, after all, they're the ones with all the power. So you want to feel more and more and more like them. So sometimes by bringing in the perpetrators and having an interaction between the original victims and the original perpetrators that acknowledges the dynamic, recognizes the roles, and then restores the dignity of both, then the descendants of either side can kind of release and leave it to them, right? And not have to be a victim or a perpetrator, right?
So by bringing them,
so that would be an example.
Okay, and by bringing them in, saying, "This is my responsibility to not get one," and I see that that's already taken care of.
Oh, you never know.
No, okay, yeah.
Jeff has seen plenty where the perpetrators did not want to take responsibility. So you have to keep playing with it. Is it Jean V? Yeah. I think there's a lot of background noise.
No, it's not me. There's somebody playing music.
You?
Someone has music on. Do you hear music?
That I can't hear. No, I can't hear music.
Oh, I'm getting music. I don't know. Weird. I can't control the audio or the video on mine, so.
Right. If you can just mute your iPad, might be helpful. It's not music, it's just a lot of rustling. So any arena, I mean, this is the whole art, not a science thing, right?
Yes.
Is that at least helpful?
Oh.
Yeah.
There's my camera.
Jean V, I'm sorry, you're still not muted and you're talking into the mic.
Yeah, I don't know where the controls are.
If you have a mute button on your iPad, that would work too. The physical mute button would work as well. Sometimes, there you go. Okay, so any other questions or comments? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the notes. Oh, not the notes. I'm going to go to the article by Francesca Mason-Boring. So I'm going to figure out how to get this to you. While I have my computer problems, I cannot do it. The simplest thing would just be to send you the PDF of the knowing field, but that feels out of integrity because the knowing field, you're supposed to pay for it. But I do want to send you the article, but it's a PDF, so I don't know if I can take screenshots or whatever. So give me a little time on getting this article to you. I will try and get it to you. But it's a really nice interview of Francesca Mason-Boring by Diana Claire Douglas, who's in Canada, on the topic of social, what they call communal constellations. It's the same, collective constellations, that sort of thing. And basically what Francesca says is that she doesn't really do them on their own, but she does see them arise from a personal constellation. And as I was rereading this today, I wished I had it handy for my discussion with you guys, because you guys would really recognize your experience on Friday night. Because what she talks about is you're doing a personal constellation, you know, a person, their issue, their family, and then the energies just start to get bigger and wilder and more intense. And for Francesca, that is the tip-off that you've entered into something much larger than the client's personal family field, right? And what she does, it's very interesting, is she turns to the client. She names it first to the group, what's going on, which you can imagine that would be useful, right, for the facilitator to be able to do that, right? And then she turns to the client and she asks the client's permission to continue, because she wants to make sure that the client is up for it. Because now we're in the space that Jan Jakob Stam was talking about with all the big energies, and something beyond the client's own particular personal issue. What she said, the emotions of the participants could be seen as empathy. Yet, when you feel into these, it is so much more personal. Wait, that's not the place. Where is it? Okay, do you become aware of the communal aspect once the constellation is started? Almost always during, not before. People come to the workshop as individuals with separate needs, and then the constellation is started and there's a tremendous emotional reaction around the topic of someone's constellation. The participants themselves are surprised by the intensity of the reactions. What I usually do then is pause and check with the individual, making sure it's okay to continue. It might be the emotional intensity has to do with their own constellation, and it might be that it is communal. At that point, again, she doesn't quite continue with the constellation. What she does is, with the client's permission, I do a round, and she does this quite formally. She has like a talking stick and that sort of thing. And it, you know, if it's a large enough group, I bet this could take an hour. But she has everyone sit down and she basically says, you know, what's going on for you? What do you notice? Are you connecting with this? For the sake of whatever is being expressed, and it needs to be honored, okay? I ask if anyone has personal emotional resonance to what happened. That seems like a really nice way to like make the group more responsibility, take more responsibility for what's unfolding before diving back in to the constellation. And then down here, she tells a story that I really quite like. And I want to offer up this no bit. Where is this bit about the no? Oh, this is really useful. What are your safety rules? I use a directive, which is very unusual in Western society. You are responsible for yourself. This is something she keeps teaching the groups. You're responsible for yourself. I also encourage everyone to use the wholly no, which is what I was talking about last weekend. Part of serving is knowing how to say no. No, I do not feel drawn to stand. No, I cannot stand in this representation. No, I do not want to continue this constellation. Okay. Participants need to be given permission not to stay in the field if it is uncomfortable to the point where they no longer feel secure. Okay. Now, I just want to offer this one little case history. I think it's really interesting. A client had significant health difficulties and personal challenges and wondered what impact their family history could be having on their personal health and life situation. Typical constellation, right? At the time of registration, the client expressed clearly their personal symptoms and difficulties. As far as their family history was concerned, the only fact they shared was that one grandfather had a problematic military history. The dynamics of the family field were not known to anyone present. We placed members for the family system to see if the symptoms of the client resonated with any of the family members. When the representatives were placed in the field, every single representative collapsed on the floor and was non-responsive. Almost every person in the circle felt nauseous and faint and was sweating. Other participants, many of whom were health professionals, supported those who were having physical difficulty despite feeling unwell themselves. I asked the facilitator, apparently she wasn't facilitating, if I could smudge the room with sage, and the facilitator agreed. Everyone started to feel better as I smudged, and the representatives on the floor who had been unresponsive were revived. Several months after the constellation, the person came to me and was transparent about their family history. The family owned slaves, shipped diamonds, and profited from all. They also had a family member who was a grand dragon of the KKK. So to some degree, the family system persecution of Black people had never been interrupted. So this is the kind of thing we can fall into. By the way, I love this. This is not on social fields, but I love this following up bit. There were several learnings here. Systemic constellation is relatively new as a method, especially when compared to indigenous healing traditions. Remember, she's 50% Shoshone. It can be helpful to be aware of technologies such as burning sage, which have been served working in these larger fields for millennia. I just kind of really love that. Obviously, you need to do these things with integrity. But I loved her sense that the constellation field, the social field that turned out to be about slavery, could be helped by this medicine, this ancient medicine. It seems to me it is a reminder that any time people come together for healing, understanding, and insight, they are stepping into a sacred space. Okay? It is also a demonstration that we are in a human body with limitations that fields and energy do not have. That's a really good sentence. We are in a human body with limitations that fields and energy do not have. So the human body can be a limitation. There's one other bit in here I really, really liked. I want to find if I can. There's so much in here. I could read the whole thing, but I'm not going to do that. Here we go. When I'm facilitating, I have as an option that we might move into bigger fields when something wants to happen in the constellation. For instance, in constellation as ceremony, remember I was talking about ritual constellations. In constellation as ceremony, I have the perception that something just happened that brought the field more deeply into the sacred. I don't necessarily name it or talk about it. I'm just aware that the essence of the constellation has changed. It might be that the sense of the sacred or the ceremony comes when an issue becomes so huge that the only way you can address it is with humility. There are times when this happens, and I use ceremony as a way to acknowledge, integrate, and hold a space which is really too large for one person to hold. I think that's really, really nicely written. Yeah. Okay. So again, I have a commitment to send that to you once I figure out how to do it. But in the meantime, I'm just wondering if there are any reactions to her article or any questions. I'm hoping, even though people may be tired, there's something inspirational about what she wrote. So I'm just interested in people's reactions. Just unmute yourself and go ahead and talk if you have something you want to share.
I mean, I think it's really inspirational. I love that we have the option to like stop, everybody sit down, you know, we'll talk about what's coming up and maybe how this is personally relevant when the field is clearly becoming bigger than what our original intention was, and to like smudge it out. And not that it's all gone, but it's like, you know, part of the ritual process to know that we are clearing this, we're healing this, we're not just sitting in this to suffer or, you know, perpetuate
Christina, I just lost your voice. That may be me.
I mean, that was about it.
We can hear her.
Good. Yeah, it's mine is so bad. Go ahead and keep on talking, Christina.
I mean, I just think that's it. I was acknowledging the options she offered, and I really like the ceremony aspect of it. I feel like that's a great container.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And obviously stay in rapport with the client. You don't want to just abruptly stopping constellations can feel really bad to clients, having had that happen to me once. So stay in rapport with the client and yeah, all that stuff. But I do love what she's up to here. Recognizing that something sacred and bigger is showing up is really, really strong, really sweet. And again, any rituals like this we have to do with integrity. You know, smudging is a particular Native American ceremony, as long as it feels like you're doing it with integrity. Or you can bring rituals from your, I mean, I could bring along some holy water and throw some holy water everywhere. It's the same meaning. It's the same sort of clearing energy. Any other comments from anybody? Which I won't be able to hear, apparently, all of. Computer.
Well, that's helpful. I mean, the tools of kind of just saying, okay, let's just recognize how big this is, and I'll sit down and.
Anybody else? Any thoughts or comments?
Well, I mean, I think it's very interesting what she did as far as bringing smudging in, but I guess I'm left a little, like, I guess, confused as to how that winds up being a healing maneuver as we would normally think of it in the family constellation contact, right? Because there was it's not like the representatives themselves did anything, right? I mean, and it's not even,
right.
I mean, it's almost, they didn't say anything to each other. There are no healing sentences. I mean, really how it kind of lands, I mean, I'm using a metaphor here, an analogy. It would be like the equivalent of, like, in the middle of a constellation, if I were facilitating or something, and all the representatives were dead or just exhausted, and I said, well, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm just going to channel a bunch of vortex into everybody, you know, and which would you, okay, and people might feel that, and it might create an impact.
Yeah, no, I see what you're concerned about there, and I think it's a really good point. I think what she's saying is that her perception, and not everyone would agree with this, by the way, so again, lots of room for variety, is that the constellation being done for a personal issue unlocked larger social forces that were beyond the scope of the group to manage or hold or somehow be present to, and that the smudging, like, it's like if all of a sudden you were doing a constellation and the room filled with smoke, you'd open the windows. That's kind of the way I see the smudging, is that, you know, there was a sense of larger, more problematic, heavy, possibly unmanageable fields of energy, and the smudging just helps clear a bit. it is perfectly okay, by the way, to use other technologies, again, as you warn, Guy, within reason, in the context of constellations. You know, it's really interesting. There was a guy named John Chaney up in Seattle, and in addition to constellations, he knows 5 elements Chinese medicine, and he does that tuning fork stuff, tone healing. Yeah. And he actually goes up to representatives and uses it on acupressure points while you're in a role. As part of, it was fascinating. And it felt amazing. And so I'm not completely against you doing vortex healing as part of your constellation practice if it felt in order and it felt, you know, somehow systemically right. And I appreciate your caution around that as well. We do want to be careful about trying to stay true to the, you know, the practice of systemics that we're up to here. Is that a helpful response, Guy?
I'm just gonna say I've been in John's things sometimes, and it worked. It seemed to work well, and also I've done energy healing sometimes on a constellations client, but you know, only when it feels to me like the field suggests it. So it's, you know, it's not like every time, but occasionally it's come up.
Thank you, Amy. And I'm sorry, Guy, you were about to say something?
No, I'm just saying I appreciate the response. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting. It kind of, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It opens up other possibilities. So it's just something for me to sit with. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm so glad. You bet. And John V., I think you were going to say something earlier at the same time Guy started speaking a couple minutes ago.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to kind of visualize the situation where it's beginning to kind of grow really big on you. Is do you ask people to sit down and process a little bit and then do a ceremony? Say, yeah, a little something about what they're experiencing, or are these two completely different things that you would do? Not try to combine them. Yeah.
I don't know. You know, she's speaking theoretically here. And I do think that whatever you end up doing, you have to do within the integrity of your own practice. Again, I would caution a little bit against sudden stoppings of constellations. Right. And again, she's not doing processing. That's really important. She's handing around a talking stick for people to share briefly, so that the voices of the people present can be heard. I'd invite you to write to her and say, I read your article and it creates 5 new questions for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, right. Excuse me. Right there at that juncture, I'm still not clear exactly what the intent is. When you say get a readout from each of the people, as individuals as far as how they feel about shifting the directionality of the constellation, or getting a readout from each of the individuals in terms of their representative experience, you know?
Yeah, I'm not going to drill down too deeply. I'm not going to drill down too deeply into this because I think we kind of don't know. I have been in these circles with her, and basically it's each person sharing their response to what's going on, in a brief and very experientially oriented kind of way. And she doesn't do a lot of editing, and her stance tends to elicit Not a lot of chatter and story, deep stuff, like, you know. But I can't drill down too deep because I wasn't there. So, and this is a journal article. So I invite you to read the article when you get it. And if you want to ask her questions, I would email her and ask her. And then let us know what she says. Okay, good questions, everyone. Very, very thoughtful, facilitatory kinds of questions. I really appreciate that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do the last little bit of lecture, and then we're going to do some constellation stuff together. Okay, so now I need to go back to this. Okay. Okay, so there have been, Francesca does say that basically she does not do a lot of what are called communal constellations, collective constellations, social issues constellations. People name them different things. But it's too bad Peter isn't here. Peter and his friend Josh have both done them. They did one on gun violence. They've done them on other things as well. I can't remember. I think they've been really positive experiences. And there's kind of a subset of constellations people out there who really dig this stuff because they're kind of social justice people, and they want to bring the tools of systemic constellations to looking at these larger issues. Yeah. So I want to just offer one model for like gathering a group of people and doing a social issues constellation that isn't about a client coming with an issue, but it's the whole group deciding it wants to look at a larger social issue of some sort. And this is the model, again, I have from Jan Jakob Stam. I would not even begin to claim authority on this. I have experienced some really cool social issues constellations. I have experienced a few that I kind of went, not so sure. There was one at the Australasian Intensive that was terrible, is all I could say. It was just terrible. It got really messy. And it was partly what I mentioned to you before in the class about not having a single clear leader. I think was mostly what led to that being a very uncomfortable experience. But the first thing that Jan Jakob Stam, I'll write that in there, Jan Jakob Stam, this is his model. First of all, you really do need to be very clear, no solutions. Francesca says something really interesting in the article. It's a very strong statement. There are people who come, who do this work, who still want to hate their mother, but instead they want to heal Mother Earth. Right? This is the sort of thing she doesn't recommend, right? Where we're projecting our neediness onto these social issues, right? Healing the earth, that sort of thing. No solutions. It's really, really important because they're too big and we're too small. The other thing that Jan Jakob says that was really interesting is that everyone has a role, whether you end up in an actual representation or not, and this includes the facilitator, he says. So as the facilitator, you just need to be kind of noticing that. You want to be thinking the question, who is the client? Yeah, who is the client here? In some sense, it's the group looking at the question. In other sense, it might be something larger, or it might be nobody in a way. Right? What are we up to here? Reiterate, he says, to be very, very aware that you're connecting with some really big energies, really big energies. And then there's the question of responsibility. He wrote something really quite nice here. What does he say? How did he put it? I can't find it now. About response. Oh yeah. Constellations usually invite or encourage responsibility. With the social issue constellations, with social issue constellations, our quote unquote ability to respond, that is responsibility, is very different, perhaps quite limited because of the size and scope of the issues. Yeah. And the last thing he says here, it's a this is classic Jan Jakob. He loves these provocative questions. There's this sort of thing in the social justice world, social activism world, you know, are you prepared to be part of the solution, right? We've heard this. Be part of the solution. And what he says in a constellations context, are you prepared to be part of the problem? Which I think is really kind of brilliant. Are you willing to recognize that, you know, there's no innocent position and that we're, you know, are you prepared to be part of the problem? Which I think really starts to move us into a useful place of responsibility. And then here's a model. It's just his model. It's a good model. I've seen it a few times. It tends to kind of keep a container for it because that's kind of the key piece. First, the model is that the group agrees on an issue, whatever it is, gun violence, you know, colonialism, the rights of indigenous people, whatever it might be. The group brainstorm a few critical starting elements. Like what are the 3 or 4 things we got to start with? Yeah. So he takes a little time, writes up on a whiteboard, get enough critical starting elements. And he says, his sort of qualification for a calling to represent something is that you begin to feel, oh shit, I think I'm supposed to represent this. Crap. Then he thinks that you're probably called to represent that.
and we all know that feeling.
Yeah, right. Shit. I mean, mine in the healthcare one was that I was going to be represent the government.
The what?
Shit, I'm going to have to represent the government. Shit.
Oh, the government.
The government.
Yeah.
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 And then more elements are added along the way. So the way that works is that you have those 3 or 4 in the beginning, and they, you know, the facilitator does the normal stuff. They sort of set themselves up. How are you doing? A little reporting out. Yeah. And then people in the circle just, again, oh shit, I guess I represent blah, blah, blah. And they stand up and they say, you know, I'm the European Union, right? Or, you know, I am, in the case of the healthcare constellation we did, someone came in as death, right, eventually.
Leslie, do you mean that the leader doesn't give that role? The person just feels like
exactly
they need to step
exactly
in. Okay.
Yeah. And I can imagine you might have to exercise some control if people are just coming in like crazy and you need to slow them down or bring back some thoughtfulness, and it should be kind of not too fast, because you can feel sometimes when people stand up in a role, they're doing it because they think they know the systemics of the issue. And so, of course, I have to bring in the families of the victims, right? Or, you know, so you, hopefully that's, with the ones I saw with Jan Jakob Sham was a pretty responsible group, and that wasn't, no slowing down was required. So people just, you know, in this case it was, you know, I'm the health education system. Someone just stepped in, and another one came in. I'm the pharmaceutical industry, and they came in. Yeah. You're not looking for a resolution, so the time together can determine the ending. Look, our hour's up. Or a sense of an insight or a big enough shift. I think the healthcare one went on for about 20 to 30 minutes. I don't think they need to be very long. You're going to need a little time in the beginning to brainstorm the issue and the critical starting elements. And then at the end, what he does, and I quite like this, is he invites everyone to notice when there were shifts or movements. Yeah? So, you know, when, I'll give a different example. I did one with him on the refugee situation in Europe, because we were in Germany, so that was very much on people's minds 2 years ago. Still is, of course. And everything changed when a representative for the European diaspora, the Europeans who had been refugees over the last 300 years and were in other parts of the world, when a representative for that stood up, everything shifted in the system. Because recognizing that Europeans had been refugees, it changed something. It was really powerful. And there'll be a bunch of different shifts, yeah? So you just sort of take note. What were the shifts and movements? And then I had a funny sort of reaction to this, but his focus is kind of on inviting people to take in their own way, their own person, like, okay, going further, what do you want to do about this? I kind of think that in the face of these constellations, that may not be quite the right question. But I get it. I get where it's coming from. Or if it's a group that's focused on, like they're an education group, so they're looking at education, then there may be now, I mean, I really can't imagine doing these for nonprofits, educational institutions, you know, hospitals, various environments that are highly impacted by larger social forces, and understanding the systemics of these forces are part of their mission. And so sending the responsibility back onto the group or the organization or the institution in terms of, you know, what they might do next. So that is the model. That's a model. It's a model. I want to say I did this in Virginia for climate warming, and I must admit it sucked. It just kind of had no energy. Everybody kept coming in as animals. There was some oomph. There was something missing. So, you know, and I've been to these and they've been kind of amazing. So all kinds of things.
Can you, Leslie, can I just ask you a question? So you know how some people say that client warming doesn't exist? But no, can you do this to like check that out and see what's really like going on, I guess, in a sense, right?
What did you say, Irina? I didn't say, you know how client what?
I'm sorry. It said like some people say climate warming.
Oh, the climate denial. You mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Well, in that case, I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't want to bet on the outcome. But I think that looking at the climate denial as a social issue would be extremely fruitful and interesting.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
That's very centrally located. It's not just a thing by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah, there would have to be so many ways in which they have to be in on the process. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, makes sense. Everybody has to agree with climate, you know, warming.
They have to all agree about constellations. And I just don't think we would get climate deniers in the room willing to have their denial denied by a constellation.
No.
I see.
But we could work. Yeah, I agree. You're not going to find climate deniers among constellators. Just not at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and to be fair about it, any of us who have extremely strong social, we really shouldn't be using constellations to prove people wrong. There's an energy there that's just not quite right.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, even if it's
Oh,
because
like
even we
find out
ourselves
the truth.
are proven wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking this along like something like vaccines, you know, a debate around that, and
Right. Yeah.
like just like I'm myself not clear where I stand into that, and I'm like wondering like, oh, what if?
Now that you could do,
Okay.
you could explore the vaccine thing for your own growth and learning. Sure.
So how
Sure.
would I do that? Put vaccines and
I have no idea. I invite you to figure something out and come back and report to us.
okay, I'll do that. Well, should I do it? Should I do it in a relationship to say my daughter, or should I do it just in general and me in vaccines? Because it's.
I'm going to invite you to figure it out.
Okay.
I think
I'm going to put you in charge of your own process.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll own that. Thank you for giving the responsibility back to me.
Because it really depends what the core of your question is. So you really do want to come to the question first and then figure out what elements. And then you can add more. You can always add more, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then you may find out it's not the right question. Believe me, half my constellations are finding out I've been asking the wrong question.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Because I want us to do a social issues constellation. Woohoo! If my poor benighted computer and internet connection can make that happen. Any other questions or comments about all this? I partly raise it because in certain circles it's more and more and more common. So you're going to run into it. So
I guess I find it interesting that you say come to the question first. Maybe it really is about how you frame the question that's going to set the tone for the entire experience. And whether or not you're pitting people against each other and ideas against each other, or if it sounds like the real goal is truly exploring without bias.
Yes, remember what Jan Jakob says, no solutions. No solutions.
And so what happens when you start to see that in a constellation, that sides are being taken and sort of the war is starting to emerge? Do you just stop or redirect? Come back to this original question?
It depends on how far south it goes. At the very least, one would want to say, it's really interesting. I'm noticing we're moving into polarities here. I wonder if we can actually explore the nuances of this if we're staking territory or something like that. Yeah. But if it's really far gone, then you might have to stop it and start over. I don't know. Yeah, you need to assume a certain amount of shared good faith and goodwill. And it may require an hour's worth of education before you do it. Right? So your group is on board and has a shared sense of openness to the unfolding.
And when you say an hour's worth of education, you mean like you bringing the subject to the group and talking about it or doing a lecture?
No, education about systemic constellations and no solutions.
Right.
And we're genuinely curious about the deeper unconscious systemics. And we can't do that if we've already staked our position, et cetera, that sort of thing.
Right. Education about the frame, not about the content. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it could be. It might be in the context of a day-long in-service on gun violence. And, you know, and after doing a lot of research and, again, context is everything. But if the group is not participating in a clean constellation kind of way, then there needs to be at least some education around that and what that looks like and why we would want to do it that way. Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of what happened to us on Friday when things felt like they were getting bigger. So I mean, education might be one approach, but then it also might be needing a representative for some of the conflict or the conflicting pieces.
Yes.
So.
Yep, that's another approach, you bet. Yep. You can bring in a constellation for polarization and see what it's serving in the system. Yeah. Shall we try a social issues constellation for about 30 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Sound good? A little bit of a learning lab here. And I wanted to try and, excuse me, kill two birds with one stone. So I'm going to propose an issue, but if we don't have consensus about it, then that's fine. One of Jean-V's very strong requests to this training, given her context and things she wants to work in, is to take a closer look at issues of gender, transgenderism, sexual orientation, and sort of gender queerness sort of stuff. And Jean-V and I had a long conversation about this when she was enrolling for the class, because one of the things I recognize and a lot of other people recognize is that Constellations has inherited gender binary presumption about the world. And that as transgender, genderqueer, different sexual orientations show up, sometimes this gets integrated well, and sometimes it gets integrated very poorly indeed. Just a simple, for instance, the classical form was that men represented men and women represented women. If you had a transgender person or someone who is non-binary in the room, who would they get to represent? They kind of wouldn't have a place right off the bat. Or if you had a non-binary person in the family system, who would represent that person? Yeah. Now we understand the reason for this binariness is because, generally speaking, we're dealing with parents, and until things change, and I figure by the end of the 21st century it probably will change, unfortunately, but for right now we all have one mother and one father biologically. So in that sense, we all have to deal with a binary, right? So that's really understandable. There will continue to be mothers and fathers and the sort of the place that they have. And yet there's this larger context that I think Constellations has, it's now in the moment where it's having to wrestle with it in a whole new way, both in terms of gender and in terms of sexual orientation. So that was sort of the general space that I was curious about us looking in. This might end up serving Jean-V as well, and she would end up with some more information for the kind of focus of work that she wants to do. And I think be really useful to all of us, particularly in the Bay Area. I mean, this stuff just keeps on coming up all the time in the Bay Area. But we still need to focus it from there. So number one, I just want to ask, does this general area sound of interest to people to take a look at? And then if the answer to that is yes, then the question is, we need to focus it down a bit.
I have no objection. I think it certainly is an area that, as you would say, it's kind of becoming more and more sort of in the field, as it were, and I think it would be interesting to just, I don't know, explore. So I'm open.
Thank you.
I think it's a good topic. Actually, there are a lot of members of my church community that are gay or non-binary, or just non-binary.
And by the way, anyone can also answer via the chat function if you find that easier. You can just say, I like it, or whatever. Others, do we have a consensus, or is anyone against it?
I'm just wanted to say that it's kind of in line with Bert Hellinger, and he's very traditional on kind of male and female representation. So that set the precedent for this kind of like he's known for saying statements like, well, women are supposed to follow the man, and of course it's not generalized, but he does this like, oh, women supposed to do that. So I would like to explore that in a
if anyone is interested in what Hellinger has to say on this, weirdly enough, I just happened to turn to relevant pages on this exact topic in Love Symmetry the other morning, and so I know exactly where to direct everyone for Hellinger's thoughts on this himself, and it's page 70 and 71, or at least starting at the bottom or halfway down page 70. So anyway, for later.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Guy. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Jeff, you okay on it? Oh.
He's on mute.
Okay, so, and I assume, Jean-V, you're okay on it.
Yeah.
And again, anyone can chat or...
My first thought about it is that each family field...
Jean-V, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, good. My first thought about it is that each family's field has some kind of tradition or perspective on it of accepting or being uncomfortable with it. And so rather than making it a social issue right off the bat, you bring in something that makes sure that the family's tradition towards it is clear. Like, okay, we probably have a bunch of closeted people, but we never really talk about them. And that's our family's value. Our family's value about it, and not go to the big so fast,
Are you talking about now in this group, or are you talking about with a client?
Oh, I'm talking about with a client or with us, how we.
Yeah. So my question right now is, are you into doing this as a social issue constellation right now?
I'm telling you my hesitation about jumping to that, and that I don't know. I don't know if I can. I think there's maybe some intermediate steps, but I'm not sure, because I don't want it to be so.
Is there
big.
an intermediate constellation?
Say, intermediate step. I don't know. That's a good question, but like, if we each take a moment to think about our own family field. And what we know about what we've inherited from them, and our judgments or our sense of it as an issue or a non-issue of comfort zone or discomfort zone in our families. Some people never had any problem in their families.
Well,
and, so
let me just reply back.
Yeah,
Jean-V. First of all, we could ponder how this topic historically might have sat within our individual family systems. Mm-hmm. The question would then still remain, well, what do we want to do? We could do that with respect to a particular person's individual family, but then we'd be only doing it for a single person's family system as a looky-loo to kind of get a sense of that, which could be interesting or not. I guess I'm kind of, I don't know. I personally think it would be, maybe a little bit more, it would be more useful or to look at it in a social issue kind of way, or at least I guess I'm unclear how it would be of greater value to like pick one particular person maybe at random and say, okay, how did it sit in your system in your family system?
Okay, I really wasn't saying that. I just meant that if we are doing a grounding before we enter this particular social issue.
Okay.
That would be one way to look at it. Just take a moment to think
Okay.
about your own family field.
Got it.
And we don't have to.
Got it. Yeah.
No one person, but each of us having a.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so let's hold off on process.
Yeah.
Jean-V, everybody stop talking for just a second. I'm sorry. Jean-V, let's hold off on process for just a second, okay?
Okay. All right.
Does it sound like we would like to do this first? We'd like to look at one of, something around sexuality. Jean-V, is that sounding like something you'd like to do?
Yeah.
If the process is good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the second question is we need to narrow it just a little bit, okay? Because we just can't just look at sexuality. That's way too big, right? So I put up a couple of possible topics on the right-hand side. But they're by no means exhaustive. One is something around transgender justice, given, North Carolina, bathroom laws, all that stuff. Job protection, violence, all that sort of stuff, or transgender rights might be a better way to put it. Another one might be just exploring the emerging reality of non-binariness, probably in the Western world, since the non-binariness has been around a long time. We just need the group to agree on the focus of our topic. And again, I invite people to use the chat in addition to talking in response to these, if you have other ideas or if you like any of these so far.
You said you put it up on the screen? Where is it?
On the chat function.
Oh, in the chat function. Okay, I've got to find that.
Yeah, well, I'll just read them to you again. It's just the two.
Oh, okay.
Which is,
yeah.
Got it?
Yeah, I got it. I know what you're talking about.
Good.
I wrote them
Yeah,
down.
It's in a different place on an iPad than it is on a computer screen, unfortunately.
Okay.
We've got 2 votes for exploring this manifestation or this reality around non-binariness. We've got 3 votes for that.
Yeah, I vote for that.
Okay. Sounding like a bit of a, okay. So, and I like your idea, Jean-V, about doing a little bit of a grounding meditation first. Before we do that, let's start out with, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 if I include myself, but I should probably remain as a facilitator. What are 2 or 3, things, we really got to have in this constellation? Elements, representations. A spectrum. What does that mean, Christina? Tell me what you mean by that.
Sure. I mean, I feel like everybody can relate to the fact that, or I shouldn't say everybody ever, but there's a certain maleness about certain women. There's a certain femaleness about certain men. We all have like our own mix of the two. What I feel like that's what binary is the really polar kind of opposites. You're this and not that. You're that and not this. Whereas the reality is we are all a mix. So I think of it as a spectrum.
So, and just to be more explicit, so we're not talking about a rainbow, it's the gender spectrum?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That might be one. Okay. Anybody else? What else would be of the 2 or 3 starting ones? Amy says, I'm thinking of a chaos constellation where we all contact non-binariness. That's possible. That's different than the format. I'm not sure what that means by we all contact non-binariness. That's really useful, though, because I realize the reality of non-binariness could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. What I meant by it is as a social thing in the social world. But I hear what you're saying is that maybe each one of us experiencing or connecting with the reality of non-binariness. If that's what you mean, you feel free to explain yourself. And my apologies, this is going to take just a few minutes for us to figure this out before we dive in. It's just a part of the process. Yeah, I mean?
Oh, I'm just thinking of it as an exploration, like what will we discover, you know, if we just sort of open it up. Okay, we know there is such a thing as non-binariness, and, you know, I guess what is it, what wants to emerge? You know, I mean, I guess I know about it in sort of an intellectual way.
Okay. So really what we would be doing then is a personal constellation for each one of us rather than exploring the larger social field, I think.
I guess, but it seems like a first step to understanding, something like that. So yeah, but I guess it's not the kind of thing you were thinking of.
Not exactly. I mean, I will go with the group. I was thinking about exploring it as binariness, as a manifestation in the culture, in the larger culture that we're all wrestling with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm understanding, Amy. So, what do you're saying with how are you wanting to pick like one of us individually to see how it sits in our system? Sort of what I was talking about before. Is that what
No, it's like what we did at the end. You know, the last exercise where we were all
a chaos constellation, which will wind up just being our individual readout. Okay, got it. So basically a quick readout rather than like a deep dive into, but getting a hit from all of us, which, okay, yeah. I mean, to Leslie's point, and I'm not sure. Well, anyway, we'll probably waste more time talking about it. So,
or maybe there are two. That might be a piece that we do, and then that it might be more obvious what to do.
Just FYI, I have a hard stop at 8:00 because I have a work meeting. Unfortunately, I have to jump onto.
Okay.
I understand. We're not going to do this for long. Probably about 15, 20 minutes. Jean-V?
Well, I was thinking that there needs to be a representative just for the concept of fluidity, and you can call it the non-binary, which is kind of difficult. I mean, fluidity tends to feel like something that puts you in it rather than just thinking about it or feeling polarized. Fluidity as a representative for fluidity. The topic is still what is the non-binary, but you're calling it a reality versus a fluidity. So.
And then how about, I think this is good. I'm liking this, the gender spectrum, fluidity / non-binariness. Mm-hmm. And then to keep it really local, how about just U.S. culture or U.S. society?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking society, but that means the whole world. I was thinking to make it a little more
US
local.
I think I mean, hey, we're living here, you know, and it's,
Bay Area.
There's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of, energy and awareness around this topic in this country that I don't know has occurred at the same level, in other countries, I don't know.
Well, it's not that fluid here in Taos. I can tell you that. There's a lot of discomfort about all of this.
I was more referring to like the North Carolina bathroom bill,
right.
Where there are other European countries where certain parts of those European countries are, staking out individual positions on this. I haven't heard anything about that. So I think the topic is really alive here in this country. So I think it makes sense to limit it to the States.
Well, why don't we start here? I mean, this is not going to be perfect, right? Well, we'll start with me with the gender spectrum, the experience of fluidity in U.S. society, and I get your, how is gender, the spectrum is the spectrum. So think of a color spectrum. Roy G. Biv, right? Red, orange, yellow, blue, et cetera, right? Fluidity would be being able to be yellow and blue at the same time, or shift from blue to yellow. That's different than the spectrum. The spectrum is just the spectrum. It's everything. Fluidity is the ability to change within this, or to not feel quite, you know, one part of the spectrum is yours. Does that sound like a decent enough explanation?
No, I think that's a really good distinction, and it raises interesting questions, which I won't raise because we're here to do a constellation. So, but I like that distinction.
Thank you, Guy. I appreciate it. I appreciate your restraint. Yeah, and yeah, and we'll find out something about it. And I really want to acknowledge Amy's really interesting question. We're probably not going to do that tonight, but I still want to express appreciation for it. Maybe we'll do it on the weekend. It sounds like a really interesting thing to try to do. It's a different format than what I wanted to invite us into. And before we move into that kind of grounding of connecting with our own ancestry and its experience and history with these matters, and what we've inherited around all this, I just want us to all notice the energy's up, right? A little bit of the crackle, right, is already alive in us, yeah? So there it is, right there. So remember, no solutions, a lot of curiosity, a relationship of personal responsibility with what shows up. In order to move forward, I want to make sure I have a thumbs up from everybody. I'm going to take us through just the tiniest meditation as Jean-V suggested, and then send us into it. But could everybody either say yes in the chat or literally take off your mute and just say yes? I want to hear it from everybody.
Yes.
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 Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Which, my audio is so unreliable tonight. That was a funny exercise for me to invite. But I think I ended up hearing everybody, so thank you. And just so we can decide now, who says, oh shit, I think I'm supposed to represent the gender spectrum.
Think that a little bit since I suggested it, but
great.
I'm not attached.
No, that's fine. Fluidity. Who feels fluidity is oh shit, I'm supposed to represent fluidity.
I can do it.
Okay. Yeah.
Was that Arena?
Yes.
Great. And then U.S. Society. Who's like, oh shit, U.S. Society, that's mine. Is that you, Jeff?
Yeah, I could, or Jeff could. I don't care.
Okay, Guy, yours was the first voice I heard, so Guy, you're that one, okay?
Okay.
And then as we go through the process, so that leaves Amy and Jean-V and Jeff to kind of watch what happens. And at some point, feeling called to be pulled in as something else, either say it out loud over the audio or write it in the chat what you're coming in as, okay? So let's just all take a second, ground ourselves, just and connect with your ancestry and probably the cultures your ancestry have come from as well. You know, regional and other countries. And the inheritance you have around gender, men, women, gay men, gay women. The hidden transgender people, perhaps, the people who are more fluid than their world would allow them to notice. And I'm just going to share, the minute I acknowledge the people who were closeted from fear and didn't even know necessarily consciously, something settled in me, including those ones. And just honor and respect all the life that came through these people too. And the cultures throughout time that have kind of dealt with this creatively and organically, and the ones that have had a really hard time with it. And then come on back. And Christina, Guy, and Irina, in your roles, why don't you step on up? Just step into those roles that you volunteered for. I'm not going to be able to see much of this because I've got so much lag going on. But I am hearing you pretty much okay. So Christina is the gender spectrum, Irina is fluidity, and Guy is US society. Just stand up and face each other. Feel the role a little bit. Take your places, your positions. It's facing the camera, it's turned away, close up, far away. Noticing something?
Mm-hmm.
What you noticing?
Well, first, what was interesting was that while I was kind of just reclining on my bed, you know, I got a hit, and it seemed like it was toward both of them. And now, interestingly, in, you know, the magic of how these things happen, Christine's picture and Irina's picture have now separated, and Amy is in between them. So there's now, so it's like they were together, like just like you did in the Constellation, and then when they separated, and then it allowed me to like differentiate. Okay, what is this feeling? Which one is this feeling with respect to? And I recognize. So there's some. I feel pretty neutral toward the spectrum. Like the spectrum, it just feels like the spectrum. Okay. Fluidity. I feel, yeah, there's like anxiety, almost
And I'm going to invite pretty brief reports just so that we can move.
Yeah. It's like anxiety and also a little a little like sort of this sort of distressed anxiety, maybe a little bit of anger, a little bit of perpiness, just a homeopathic or I mean just it's just
Okay.
anxiety.
Okay.
Defensive anxiety, toward fluidity.
The others, again, I'm going to invite pretty short reports. Sorry.
Yeah, I can share.
Point.
I'm feeling pretty good. Kind of moving around, very free. It's like
Can't hear you. It's hard to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I'm feeling feeling good, free. Just really good, like free feeling. Can be anything I want. When I kind of dance around, shake. Yeah, when I look at guy, yeah, not really like interested in connecting there. Yeah, I don't know. That's good for now, I guess.
Okay. And Spectrum, how are you?
I'm pretty unemotional. I am bigger than both of them. I'm way bigger. I hold it all. Their conflicts are just kind of within themselves.
Makes sense.
Amy or Jean-V or Jeff, if you're feeling called into a role, feel free to stand up into it. I won't be able to see you do that. So you will either have to announce it or put it in the chat before you stand up.
I feel called to be the fashion industry, which wants things to be really clearly one or the other or somehow saleable. Like fluidity is like, okay, as long as we can control it and still make money off it. That's what it feels like.
Okay. So I'm going to invite you to stay in the role and invite yourself to be surprised.
Okay.
I don't know if this is a role, but I'm feeling like I am those that don't feel like they have a horse in this race.
Okay. That's interesting.
And how does that feel?
Not involved really. Just I see it going on, and I don't support it. I always support everybody's rights to be who they are, but I don't feel particularly involved.
And I think I'm feeling like I don't know whether to use the word ally or advocate of people who do feel more fluid.
Yeah, I can't.
I don't feel like I'm fluid myself, but I feel like, they have rights, and I feel like some kind of a champion, something like that.
As the spectrum, I just noticed I felt like everybody kind of reported something somewhat limiting, except for fluidity, which it kind of excites me, the word freedom. Somebody has freedom.
So I'm feeling we probably could use about 5 or 6 more people. But I'm going to come in as violence.
Oh, that has my heart beating faster.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Want to hide.
And then it's kind of an oh shit, because I will defend, people's right to be themselves, and I don't want to be in the way of violence, but I don't feel like I can stand by.
It's interesting because this doesn't feel violent.
Yeah.
It actually feels like love.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's really interesting.
Feels like love.
It's slightly confusing in here. I'm not looking at any of you.
Yeah. Leslie.
And there's a deep desire to do the right thing.
Okay, Leslie, this is going to be a moment real quickly where I'm going to interject with something from my particular world that is showing up potentially as relevant here. So 2 weeks ago, the lineage that I'm a part of did a very, very big healing for humanity on the issue of violence. Actually broke down the focal point.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask you to hold off on that.
Okay.
Because we're in the middle of a process here. I can tell it's relevant. But I actually want us to finish the process first, okay?
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I want to be really careful about interpreting this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that aside, I do have some other things that I could report if you're interested.
That would be great.
Sure. So the first layer of strong emotions that I felt toward fluidity felt like anger. And it felt like the anger of men. Okay, so it felt like patriarchal anger, which kind of makes sense to me because,
So again, no interpretations, just report out the experience and very briefly. We've got about 5 minutes left.
All right, and then, so that was the front note, and underneath that, I felt more like sadness and grieving on the part of the women.
I want to move. I want to take up space.
The facilitator says, do whatever you got to do. Violence is actually now kind of interested in this, in things.
I just want to hide. Like, this feels better.
What? You're echoing, but what did you say feels better, Irina?
Hiding.
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 Okay, got it. Okay. Interestingly enough, that has this one relax. No surprise. Interesting. No surprise. Yeah.
It's interesting. This one's feeling is that its primary motivation is to bring everybody together.
It's interesting.
Weird. But it's really dopey. It's just a little dopey. Anybody else have something to report?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
shifting or changing?
Well, in the fashion industry, I'm still feeling like, I'm all about the surface. And I'm suspicious of people reporting in with feelings. Like, this is only about the surface. I mean, the deeper stuff is, might be moving around, but I'm still wanting to control the surface of it. And yeah, so it's funny. Didn't expect to be here.
So I feel disappointed that fluidity needs to hide, but I don't blame that one.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Like, I wish things felt safer.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The United States feels likes that too.
Feels like there should be a rep for safety.
I'm feeling like it's my part in this to be a defender of people's civil liberties, even though I don't have any direct contact or experience with these other kinds of people. I guess these other people's experience, but they have the right to it, and it's part of my responsibility to defend that.
I really like that. That makes me feel safer. I want to come up again.
Feels kind of similar to my role. Maybe we're representing lots of people. I don't know.
Well, and what I heard Jeff say was that until this point, they were kind of bystanders, whereas your representative sounded like people who are already more committed.
Okay, thanks.
Subtle difference, not a big one, but yeah. So we're going to bring this to a close. There's 3 other representations that I invite you to just feel the presence of for a second and see if they change anything. Just imagine we have some more people, and in fact, I'll just put some things on the floor and bring them in. One of them is, well, 2 of them are the polar female and the polar male.
Figured.
Okay. So those 2 roles, somewhere in this circle. The polar female and the polar male. Basically the ones who, if they get together, can have babies. And then the 3rd representation would be for life. And then just see, now that we have those 3 in the space, does anything change for you?
I appreciate life. It feels like more my equal. I felt like there's been, I hate to, it feels weird to say this, but like a lot of squabbling below,
Hmm. Hmm.
Feels kind of reassuring to me to have life, something bigger than all of us.
Yeah. Hmm.
Any other responses or reactions? Any shifts? Do you change in any way?
No.
Not for me. It feels good and like more inclusive. But
What? Can't hear you.
Feels good. I don't know what's going on. Feels good, all inclusive, all like life includes me, male, female, sure. So good.
And I feel more grounded with having the polar male and female. It's like, well, yeah, those are still, how we get more people. So kind of, it feels good to acknowledge that, but without being exclusive.
It's interesting. I have the advantage of being able to arrange the cups on the floor a little bit. Sorry, guys. And there's something about the male and the female are standing next to each other. And when they stand together in some kind of partnership, like allyship is a better way to put it, alliance, I approve. I approve them working on each other's behalf. I don't know why. Like, oh, I can kind of step back when those two are not fighting each other.
You mean as violence, Leslie?
Yes, as violence, I step back a little bit.
Mm. Mm.
So any last thoughts before we close out? Okay, everyone step out of, oh, I'm sorry. Everyone step out of the roles then.
All right.
Me.
So we obviously needed a little bit more time with that and to bring in a few roles perhaps or unexpected roles. Another representation I was thinking of was the children. That one kind of came to mind at some point. There was Amy's idea around safety. Did anyone, and I know, Guy, if you have to dive out, but I just want to ask, did anyone notice a moment when there was a shift that seemed to matter?
As I mentioned, the biggest one for me was when fluidity hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And perhaps that was a negative shift, but nonetheless a shift, yeah.
Well, it showed up as like a relief or a relaxing of the belly for the representative for the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. For arena, for fluidity, it's when a bystander got involved. Or someone who had no dog in the fight, no horse in the race. When that one got involved, it created safety.
Am I on? Yes.
Yes.
I appreciated the polarized male and female just as much as the fluid one, and I felt like they were all my children, and just that it's very rare that somebody's truly stuck at one end or the other. They're all within me.
Right.
Interesting. I have to drop off.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, Guy.
Bye.
We're about to finish up, so thanks for coming around.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. As a fashion industry,
Any other shifts that people noticed for violence? It really mattered that the male and the female were there and working together. I think someone else, we were overlapping. Someone else was talking.
Oh, I just wanted to say that being in the fashion industry, I was going, well, I have to stay somewhat pretend neutral. That's how it feels. But I'm taking cues from the society and from what I'm seeing people do with fluidity and the gender stuff. But I'm like, I'm not in it at a level of caring Yeah, like I said, it's this money motivation. So it's an interesting place to go to because I really hate the fashion industry. So. And I feel it forces us into these weird stereotypes, terrible stereotypes. So.
Did you find something you appreciated in the role then?
Yeah, just that to kind of, get that they don't have that much power at some deep level, but on the surface they seem to continuously. That's what I got. So,
okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we go all appreciative fluidity, they'll figure out how to make fashion for that, right?
Yeah, right. That's right. They will. So, yeah. They're followers. They're not true leaders.
They kind of do already even, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, other noticing they're followers. Okay.
I already said I felt better when life came in, and also the polarized male and female. It seemed a little bit calming, like, yeah, things aren't perfect now, but ultimately, the shifts are trending toward what I think is a more positive direction, more inclusivity. So kind of like, it'll be okay in time. Like the larger picture than the right now.
Anything else that people noticed? I mean, we didn't have a lot of time. We didn't really see a big shift. I have a sense that there's still a movement in there that we didn't get to, but that's fine. We did what we could with the time we had. But any other last observations about that or the process that seems useful to you or worthy of note?
I felt an intensification when you brought in, I don't know which element it was exactly, but when you brought those other elements in, I felt an intensification of my duty, I guess, to defend the rights of individuals to be what they want to be, even if I don't really understand it. I don't need to understand it. I just need to make sure they have that freedom without violence.
Which is interesting because, of course, in the U.S., freedom is such a high criteria, isn't it? So that's really interesting. Well, Jean-V, I don't know if you got anything new from this for your learning, but I hope you have something to chew on. And thank you, everybody else, for diving into this. This was just something we'd try. We can, if people are interested in trying a lengthier version of something on a different topic, let us all know. It's certainly an option. And otherwise, thank you all for diving in.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.
See you next week.
See ya.
See ya.